We begin with the SEC on CBS game of the week. That is Georgia heading to Knoxville, Neyland Stadium, taking on Tennessee. Danny, when you're looking at this matchup, there are few paths, I think, to Tennessee being able to pull the, outright upset, right? Like it's going to take a lot of things to happen. So what is the way that Tennessee is going to be able, what's the best path for Tennessee to be able to hang in this and get it to the second half and be able to make it a little bit of a game? Because the advantages of Neyland Stadium are not going to be there if you're asking Joe Milton to overcome a 17-point deficit in the second half. So how does Tennessee get to that spot where maybe the environment is a little bit of an X factor of its own? What has to happen on the field?
Most concerning to me is what we saw last week was their inability to get off the field. Mizzou held the ball 40 minutes. That was insane. I hadn't seen anything like that. Now, Georgia's offense a little bit different. Cody Schrader kind of took over that game. They just marched up and down the field. Because I think there's two ways. One, we have not seen Carson Beck look rattled. I thought for a sliver of time in the Missouri game, he looked uncomfortable, where he was just a little bit off, missed a couple throws, but he has not been rattled. You've got to get James Pierce going. You've got to get some sort of pressure to throw him off his game. But he really has a good grasp of the system. Bobo's done a great job, scheming up plays. They're very balanced now. Now they had Milton going last week. It looks like it's really hard to do that. So, I think it's got to be explosive plays. That's where Joe Milton, has been better. He's not going to drive the length of the field and kind of execute this offense. I don't know. I am trying to talk myself into Tennessee could have a chance in this game. But as Georgia continues to get healthier, they continue to improve, I'm finding it harder and harder to do. But I think it starts with, somehow making Carson Beck uncomfortable, forcing an interception, forcing some turnovers. And that's where I do think, Kirby Smart after the Auburn game, they came back and he said it's really hard to win on the road in the SEC. That's the definition of this game. So it's going to be hard. I don't think it's going to be easy. I'm just trying to envision a scenario where it could be in the fourth quarter and it's a 3-point game. And it's hard for me to imagine that.
Do you remember how good Tennessee was last year?
Yeah.
Remember how that game against Georgia went?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was between the hedges.
But yeah, it was also between the lines, and that is where Tennessee cannot stack up with Georgia. It's the situation where we've talked about how Tennessee's defense has improved this year, and it has. But at this point, it's more just because last year's defense was so bad. Because if you break it down, the deeper we've gotten into the season, Tennessee's defense in conference play has been very ordinary compared to what it was doing in non-conference, where it kind of really stacked up some numbers. Success rate in non-con was 69.6. It has dropped to 57.5 in conference, which isn't terrible, but still, that is a huge drop-off. Explosive play rate allowed has practically doubled from 6.9% to 14%. Points per drive went from 0.78 to 2.1, et cetera. This stuff keeps going on and on everywhere at every single number you look at. And it's very same thing on the offensive side of the football. And meanwhile, Georgia is a team that just kind of keeps getting better every week, even as it's gotten deeper into conference play. Its offense is top 10 and mostly top 5 in every single stat I care about. A fun stat, one of my favorites, it leads the nation in this. 50.1% of Georgia's possessions have reached the red zone this year. That is the most in the nation. But they're not great. They're only scoring 4.7 points per, which is 25th. But the point is, Georgia is really good on offense. I honestly feel like their offense is better than their defense this year. The defense is still, we talked about it earlier this year. It's not the same top 5 absolute juggernaut unit it has been. It's mostly a top 20-ish defense in a whole lot of categories. It's top 10 in some, top 5 in a few. And the one thing I feel like if Tennessee has a prayer is that it has to hit big plays, because that is the one thing I think Georgia's defense has been a little more susceptible to this year. They are giving up some explosive plays. Their defense ranks 41st nationally in explosive play rate allowed. They don't bring a ton of pressure. They don't miss a lot of tackles, but you can scheme somebody open against them. Their secondary is very good, but they're also still human and they still have to try to cover people and they make mistakes. So Tennessee is going to have to hit big plays for touchdowns, because when you do get to the red zone, you can score on this team. It's just you very rarely get to the red zone against Georgia's defense.
Basically agree with everything that has been said so far. Tennessee is not going to be able to methodically drive the ball enough times to beat Georgia. It has to reverse the trend of its inability to hit explosive passes through the air, right? I don't think that you can hit all of these explosive runs on Georgia. I don't think Tennessee's defense ever was really expected to maintain in conference what it did in the non-conference, because they played Virginia, which had a disastrous fall camp in terms of injuries, and they also played UTSA, which didn't have Frank Harris and Austin P. So, I mean, their numbers were always going to go down. To me, this is sort of a defense that's, I think, appropriately rated somewhere between, like, I don't know, 30 and 45 nationally. Like, it's a solid defense. The defensive line is pretty damn good. The linebackers, when they've since kind of been beaten up a little bit with injury, and Missouri ate those guys lunch. So can the linebackers get right in a week? Because Georgia's offensive line has been looking better every week. And I know it was Missouri, or I know it was Ole Miss. And you guys know what I think of Ole Miss. Like, I don't think they're physical. I don't think they have very much talent. And Georgia pushed them around hard. I don't think Georgia will push Tennessee around to the same extent, but this is still a real question for Tennessee's defense. How do these linebackers play? They've stopped the run for the most part this year. They
Except
may be able
for
to
Missouri. Like, that was the thing.
Yeah, right. Which is the most concerning data point, because it was last week coming off a de facto bye because you got UConn and Missouri smoked them. So let's insert some soft factors here, right? Tennessee's crowd. Georgia has really only gone on the road this year, one time?
Yeah, Auburn.
It was just
And
the
it was
Auburn game.
close.
Yeah, because Jacksonville's a neutral site against the Gators. So, how does this Georgia team handle that? But, like, getting Mims and Bowers back, I think, is a big deal. Like, those are 2 first-round type players that you just inserted into this offense a week after Halloween.
Yeah, that at Auburn and then at Vanderbilt are the only 2 true road games that Georgia has played all year. The Bulldogs are going to be finishing at Tennessee and then at Georgia Tech for the regular season finale. Do you think that Georgia, which against Ole Miss, like, if you're going to look for, things that are really popping out, it was the best rushing performance of the season. Is that are they going to be able to replicate that? Because I'm looking at this game also with an eye on Atlanta. I'm looking at this game also with an eye on the college football playoff, and a run game that, was not producing at a high clip earlier in the season is going to be better when you get someone like an Amarius Mims back into the lineup on the offensive line. And I know they've been a little bit banged up there elsewhere. Do you think that Georgia is going to be able to either consciously or unconsciously continue that success that they had against the Rebels in the ground game, bringing a little bit more balance to the overall offensive attack?
Yeah. I mean, I think it plays to the fact that, they're getting Mims back. They've been healthier on the offensive line, but I also just think the fact that their passing attack has been so lethal that the way that they've kind of expanded that, like, we've talked about this a lot. They were very conservative and maybe a little timid in the passing game earlier. I think Carson Beck just wasn't really comfortable yet as the starter. And as the season has gone on, Beck has become more and more comfortable, more and more confident, and they've been much more aggressive moving the ball vertically down the field. And doing that, like, defenses have to, you spread a defense out like that, make them cover the whole field, you're going to have a lot bigger running lanes to run through. And I think we have seen that with Georgia. So, yeah, I don't know if they're going to have a guy running for like 300 yards against Tennessee again this week, but I do think they're going to be able to run the ball pretty well on them.
Tennessee is, like, legitimately more physical than Ole Miss. Like, it's a different level. Like, you're going to have to bring it, whereas Ole Miss felt easy.
If they bring pressure, they got to make sure they get to them, because that back end is dicey.
Yeah. Going to be very interesting. And again, you can watch that 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on CBS. You can stream on Paramount Plus. Check out CBS Sports HQ for pregame, halftime, postgame analysis as well.